I'm very grateful to be able to speak tonight and share my experience. It's an honour. I advise you to buckle up and perhaps grab some popcorn, because this is one heck of a tale. To begin, I will introduce myself. I'm Shiloh, 30 years old, from Bedfordshire, and despite being diagnosed with autism at the age of 26, I have been autistic my whole life. I think there is no better place to start a tale than the beginning. I always felt different, like everyone around me had some innate knowledge on how to function and be a human that I didn't have. I remember turning to my mum when I was very young and asking whether everyone else was an alien, because clearly I wasn't. But when she answered no, I asked whether I was the one, because I felt so different. This feeling prevailed throughout my life and to some extent continues, but in a healthier way. I remember struggling to understand others and socialising and always feeling disconnected from the people and world around me. I had no real friends in junior school, just people that tolerated me, because apparently carrying around a binder full of shark facts and statistics to info dump on people with is not socially acceptable. I could go into a room full of people and have them hate me within moments of being in there due to not understanding the social nuances that underpinned a social setting, like not being able to read when people had enough of my ramblings, or standing so close to a person my face was almost touching theirs, or the intonation of my voice or use of big words that people called me a know-it-all for. I remember everything being loud. My mum described me screaming whenever we entered the town centre, telling her the floor was vibrating and my ears hurt, and even certain textures overwhelmed me. I have a photo from my nursery school days when I was in a snowman costume with a fake grin plastered on my face. Inside, I felt like I was dying because of the material itching my skin, masking even in those days. I remember I didn't understand the concept of lying and therefore always ended up in trouble by offending someone, such as announcing just exactly what my mum thought of particular people to their face, like telling my new headmaster that my mum had informed me of his affair, or asking her colleague if she was the one who she didn't like. The parents of my friend loved this honesty because they knew if they isolated me, I'd tell the truth. My friends in high school even tried to train me to lie about things. The bowling incident, in which my friend told her mum we were going bowling when actually we weren't. So my friend's mum asked me a series of questions, all of which my friends had predicted would happen, so had scripted the response for me. But then she asked me where my socks were. I said, I don't have socks because we're not actually going bowling. My friends were not impressed. I took everything literally, which led to me getting into some predicaments. Apparently, picking up your feet does not mean sitting on the ground and picking them up. It was a detriment at times as people would manipulate me, and I wouldn't realize their intentions, which was damaging and upsetting and meant it was hard to trust people, and still is to a certain extent. I had so many negative labels thrust onto me at this point: sensitive, gullible, naive, emotional, lazy. How can someone with such a high level of intelligence be so stupid? These were the hardest years of my life. I felt alone, anxious, worthless, and disconnected. I was horrendously bullied, ostracized, and in the process lost my sense of self. I had my first panic attack. I realise that now, when I was in year 2, 7 years old. I remember going to the medical office and it being dismissed as me being emotional and sent back to class. I tried so hard to fit in, but it was never enough. My only solace was in my animals, my sharks, my books, and my creative writing. I could stay in my head for hours of various worlds and storylines I had created. It was a reprieve from real life. I look back now and can appreciate those qualities I had. I was caring, honest, moralistic, and intelligent. It was not me that didn't fit the world, but the world that didn't fit me. I would tell my younger self now I did deserve to feel loved and heard, and that there was so much good in me. Although the transition into high school was intense and overwhelming, high school was much better in the sense I actually had friends. We were a bunch of nerds that spent lunchtimes in the library discussing theories for the show Lost, or playing elaborate games we constructed, but it felt good to be connected and feel loved. My mental health deteriorated though. Trying to navigate the world was extremely difficult. The feelings of disconnection, self-esteem issues, and overwhelm prevailed. Everyone seemed to have it together and I didn't. Any change or newness, and I fell apart. Everything was still loud. I was still bullied, being called weird, a freak, odd, strange. I constantly felt like it was in a performance, which I guess is what masking is. I held back so much of myself, constantly analysing people in the situation in fear of rejection or ridicule, ruminating constantly on situations, making sure I handled it right, the right words, body language, and expressions. and that I didn't seem to offend. I remember being ashamed of stimming. I didn't know what it was then, and stopping myself from doing it, calling myself a freak. The panic attacks increased, and a constant sense of dread and overwhelm filled my days. I can see now why this happened. Trying to juggle so much responsibility at such a young age whilst being undiagnosed with autism. This is when mental health services came into my life. At the age of 14, I remember telling the doctor I constantly felt like I was going to die, because that is how I experienced the anxiety. I found it difficult, even then, to communicate my feelings and thoughts. I, after a considerable wait, had my first appointment with CAMH. My experience with them wasn't good or bad per se. They were baffled by me. Labels such as anxiety, depression, BBT, and bipolar were used, which is typical for females on the spectrum. Leaving in school broke me. I now realise it was the change, the loss of routine, and the increase in responsibility and independence. I tried to live my life attending college and working, but it never worked. I was always so overwhelmed and tired. The hotel I worked at hated my clumsiness. I could not make a swan napkin if my life depended on it, and I think I may have held the record for most items smashed. I also managed to offend most of the guests. Apparently, telling a woman that I thought only young people went to Magaluf wasn't something that she appreciated. I made friends, though. I found people that appreciated my quirkiness and had similar interests in me. I quit work and dropped out of college more times than I could count, unable to cope, and each time knocking my confidence and reinforcing the core belief that I was worthless and incapable. I didn't know what was wrong with me. My mental health never really recovered. It didn't help that I was misdiagnosed with bipolar at 18 and therefore being treated with medication for an illness I didn't have. The mental health service was inconsistent in its care. Sometimes I had a support worker and they would then disappear. The service once completely forgot about me, as they apparently lost me in the system for several months. I literally had a question mark over my diagnosis because I didn't seem to fit any. Crisis intervention was something I regularly experienced. It was a traumatic and tumultuous experience. I had hit rock bottom. I was no longer speaking, I never left home, and I was barely functioning. Surviving. A cocktail of medications was being used with an array of side effects, but without them working, because I wasn't ill. Then, in one moment, by pure chance, my life changed. I was given my 100th support worker, kind of kidding, and after spending a few appointments with me and checking through my history, she informed me, despite it not being her place, that she thought I was autistic, as she recognised these bad moments were all linked to big changes. She also saw my struggle with eye contact, my need for routine and structure, the difference with the way I communicated, and struggled with socialisation. We sat there for hours, completing quizzes and discussing how autism presented in females. It was a surreal moment. After feeling like there was something seriously wrong with me, that I was somehow not meant to be in this world, I realised that wasn't the case at all. I was autistic, a different way of processing and perceiving, but that was okay. It's okay to be different, and also there were more people like me. Felt a sense of relief. A label can be damaging, but in this instance, it was enabling. It enabled me to understand myself, my needs, my differences, my past, and more importantly, gain the support I so desperately needed. Initially, the mental health service resisted a referral due to the fact that the perception of autism matched that of stereotyped version of autism. It didn't factor in the nuances that we now know, such as masking that many females at birth do. My support worker fought for it, and finally I was referred to after meeting with a locum who seemed indifferent and therefore relented. I waited up to 2 years for the actual process to begin due to mishandling of the referral. In this time, it was a tumultuous experience with the mental health team, but I held on to the hope that the assessment could really change things for me, and I will forever be grateful for the support worker that supported me during that time period. The assessment itself was overwhelming, but the people conducting it were amazing and considerate, asking me if I'd prefer the light off, which is something I have never experienced or been asked. Being used to adjust to the world as opposed to the world adjusting to me. It was a process that included bringing up my past, my whole journey, from start to finish, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which evoked a lot of emotions. There was also a lot of focus on deficits, which is frustrating, but it's just how it works. Despite this, I've now come to understand the benefit of my neurodivergent brain and just how much autistic people bring to the world in terms of commitment, innovation, honesty, integrity, and creativity. I also remember in the appointment recounting how autism was used as a slur to me, even before diagnosis, and the assessor explained there isn't anything wrong with me being autistic, and the problem was with people's ignorance and perception towards it. I felt such shame at points, wondering whether this diagnosis would create problems and further ostracize me. But during this and after the process, I realised that there are ignorant people everywhere. Autism is a difference, not a disease, and it isn't something to be ashamed of. which is why I make it my goal in life, with every opportunity I get, to educate people on autism, to spread awareness, understanding, and acceptance, especially with autism in females, in order to improve the world for autistic people and to make it so people don't have to go through what I did. I remember when the doctor confirmed my diagnosis, I cried, with relief, with joy, with grief, at the life I'd lost, but ultimately feeling valid and a huge sense of hope and determination. My past began to make sense. Oh, that's why I did that. I was no longer a question mark. I finally saw a light. Like this wasn't the end, but the beginning. That I did have a place in this world and I could live my life. After being promised that the mental health service wouldn't drop my support, the mental health service dropped my support, saying I was no longer mentally ill and telling me to report to the autism service, which doesn't exist for adults. It was horrible. I begged for support for counselling and they rejected me, telling me they couldn't provide the support I needed. I felt so alone and afraid, but still the determination remained. I wanted to heal, to live again. I remember attending 2 appointments with separate doctors within the mental health team, and then both asking me questions related to aggression with autism. One even asked me if I punched walls, because that is what autism is, apparently. It terrified me that people had this view and may view me as a violent monster, and I withheld telling people about my diagnosis for several months. Also, the OT within the service also had a really stereotyped perception of autism, stating that as I spoke, I must not need much support, I must be good at maths because I'm high functioning. I'm not. All of these stereotypes and labels are damaging and harmful to my well-being and to the well-being of other autistic people. We are all individuals, and non-speaking doesn't mean high support needs. Nor does speaking or high IQ mean low support needs. It's important to get to know the individual opposed to the label. I found a private therapist who understood autism and discounted the price heavily so I could afford it. This was life-changing. I had a safe space to recount and process my past, heal, gain an understanding of who I am, and to gain healthy coping mechanisms. It was the most arduous but wonderfully empowering experience, piecing together the fragments of myself, and therefore regaining a sense of self, and learning to appreciate myself and love myself again. I will be ever so grateful for my therapist for her support and guidance. And at a similar time, I found the wonderful Autism Bedfordshire. Both my therapist and Autism Bedfordshire saved my life due to their support and understanding and commitment. They helped me to trust professionals again. And a thank you to my best friend, Amelia, who is with me throughout all of this, for understanding and caring for the worst moments. My first encounter with Autism Bedfordshire was a surreal one. The fire alarm went off and we had to be evacuated. I was still very vulnerable at this time and can still remember the look of horror on Shana's face that it happened and promised me this wasn't the norm and guiding me to put my headphones on. What was more surreal is that someone understood my difference and made accommodations. I wasn't used to that, although now I'm very forthright with my requests for adjustments. Thanks for all the courses, Autism Bedfordshire. Oh, and just to confirm, it was okay. It was only a minor kitchen fire. Those at Autism Bedfordshire saw me at the beginning of my journey, a shell of a person, traumatised, barely communicating and functioning. They've been with me from the start. Alongside my therapist, they were the first people to believe in me, to support me and guide me. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone. Autism Bedfordshire took the time to get to know me, my needs, my weaknesses and my strengths, and work with them. They do this with every person they work with, which is refreshing when you're used to being treated as a number or expected to fit in a box. They empowered and encouraged me. I attended pretty much every course available. The communication course, the confidence course, the understanding autism course, the employment course, and the budgeting course, and much more. I found a place to feel safe and heard. I connected with others, like myself, and didn't feel alone in my struggle and with my difference. I was determined to heal, to understand myself, to function and live again, and they provided the means for that. It was wonderful to engage in a way that catered to my difference and feel meaningful to me. I began without a webcam, just listening in, to finally having to remind myself that others perhaps wanted to talk. I even won my first ever competition, a creative writing competition, which I would have never had the courage to do before. They helped me to gain a volunteering role and they supported me in joining my university course. I know if I need anything at all I do is need to message, which is oddly how I ended up doing this. Not quite what I had in mind, Shana, but I'm grateful for this opportunity. I am indebted to this charity for their role in my recovery. I love you all dearly, the staff and my peers, and can't wait for the future and what it holds for my amazing Autism Bedfordshire as it expands and saves and changes lives like my own. So where am I now? This wasn't an easy journey. It took a lot of hard work and determination. I've been through a lot, and that has been traumatic, and in a more positive way has shaped me. The person who never thought she would ever live independently now has her own flat. The person who thought she would never drive has passed her test. The person who thought she would never complete higher education is on her second module studying psychology and completed a level 3 in autism. I have friendship groups, and I'm even in a relationship. I think back to when I was doped up on medication, afraid even to leave my house, feeling alone, unloved and unworthy, and surviving instead of living, and realize just how much I've grown, how far I've come, and just how capable I am, and how fortunate I am to be experiencing life with so much to look forward to in the future. I have a sense of contentment I never thought I would experience. I now embrace my differences. Being autistic is not a gift, it's not a curse, it is who I am, and it has enabled me in so many ways. I have a strong sense of what is right or wrong. I try and be honest as much as possible. I can retain useful information and sometimes not so useful information. I think outside the box. I'm very empathetic, too much so sometimes. I'm committed and resilient. Those labels given to me when I was younger were a negative perception and were wrong. It is far from easy. I still struggle immensely at times with social situations, communication, and with everyday living, but I work hard at it and ask for those adjustments, and I have a wonderful support network and healthy coping techniques. I'm currently in therapy, treating PTSD for a wonderful charity. I suffer as a result of my past, but I'm hopeful for the future. I will be forever grateful to my therapist and to Autism Bedfordshire for the support they have provided. They enabled me, a very fragmented, traumatized human being, to regain a sense of self and purpose and to feel connected and supported once more. I know there are so many out there like me who are struggling, are suffering, and their needs are not being met, and I want to tell you that it will get better. You do deserve to be heard, your needs deserve to be met, and you can absolutely do it. Keep fighting. Look at me, look at where I am and where I was. There will always be the ignorant, those who don't understand, but I believe in you and know you can be the person you want to be. You deserve it. It is the world that is the problem, not being autistic. What is my advice to neurotypicals regarding interacting and working with autistic people? It is extremely difficult trying to navigate the world as an autistic person in a world that isn't made for you, and therefore educating yourself on autism and taking the time to understand, support and adjust, such as more time, different modes of communication for autistic people. This is a must. This can be the difference between an autistic person being emotionally healthy and functioning and being able to engage productively in society or not. Also, each person with autism is an individual and deserves to be treated as such. We're all unique with different needs, wants, strengths, weaknesses, desires, and personalities, and deserve to feel heard and listened to. It may be considered a spectrum, but we don't fit on a line. There are many different traits experienced in various ways by each person. And getting to understand that can be vital in understanding how to support and interact with a person. We may experience and process the world differently, but that doesn't make us any less deserving of respect, understanding, and support. And most importantly, it is important to listen to autistic people, their insight and experience, to truly gain an understanding of autism and its many facets and traits. This is truly the only way to make the world a better and more productive environment for neurodiverse people, and to make a cohesive and productive world for everyone. I truly believe that is possible. Thank you, Shana, Lisa, Emily, Bex, Sam, Anna, and so many more, including my friends and family. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak tonight. It's an honour.